Pretty damn good.
Yeah, better and better.
Good. So what I wanted to do today was just have a conversation about our mutual friend, Jim Button, who, sadly we lost about a month ago, but who obviously had a big impact on all of our lives. So I wanted to start with just my curiosity. How did you guys all connect with Jim? How did you first meet him? So I'll start with you, Avnish. Do you remember the first time you met him?
Yeah, I do. So I had just started a business at the time, and my business partner, Jim, had come to present at a communications class at the U of C. And so she was in that class, and as Jim was presenting, sort of in typical Jim fashion, was like, hey, if any of you want to set up a meeting with me, let's do it. And so she came back to the office, and we were talking about this great presentation, this dynamic person, and he had just sold the events company and all this great stuff. And I was like, well, then let's do that. So we ended up at heading over to the venture communications office. And I remember walking in, and at the time, there's this massive table with all of these Pez dispensers all over them. And there was like 100 Pez dispensers, and then this Ernie one that was sort of right in the middle. And I remember going to grab it, and you as you open it up, the Sesame Street theme blares out of it. Like, it just comes. And so Jim came around the corner and like scolded us as if he's like, what are you doing? Like, how dare you touch these things? And I didn't know who he was because there was no sort of photos of him or anything. And so I was like, oh shit, who is this guy and why is this happening? And then he starts laughing it all off, and he's like, yeah, I'm Jim, you must be Avnish, you're Lynn, come on back. And we ended up having this hour-and-a-half meeting with Jim, just talk about like entrepreneurship and what does it mean. And it's like 24, right? I didn't know anything. So that was the first meeting with Jim. And after that meeting, he's like, hey, if you want to keep in touch, let's do that. And it was like, yes. And so that's sort of how it happened from there. It's just, you just kept on running into each other randomly and things like that. But that was it, just in pure Jim style, sort of walking around the corner and just being like, oh, well, like, who have I upset? And who is this person? And why does he look so young? And why is he shouting at me? And like,
sorry, sir.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll just leave.
Yeah.
What about you, Terry?
First I got to apologize to Julie because I kicked her. That's going to happen a few times during the course of the day. So
that's okay.
You know what? There's a couple of people that I met for the first time. I knew I was going to be friends for life. Yeah. And Jim was one of them. Av is another one. Julie's another one. Mo. Like, totally. The first time you meet someone, you walk in the room, you go, I think, after you talk to them for a few minutes, I think we're going to be friends for life. Mm-hmm. And Jim was one of those guys that was a true case. So I think the brewery's 11 years old.
Yeah, we're on our way to being 11.
So I met him 11 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Ed Nash, one of my boss at ATB, knew Tim Duffin, and he said, let's go down to Village. They make great beer. And that's the day I met him, is when you guys opened the doors at Village. And I knew at that point we were going to be friends for kind of life.
That's awesome.
And, at that point he was kind of noodling over the hump day meetings and everything like that. So it's kind of like, okay, after that point we were just conversing back and forth like on an hourly basis. So it's been 11 years, but it was one of those days that you'll never forget. Yeah. Where you met him, how you met him, and the lasting impression he had right at that first time.
That's funny. That's interesting. What about you, Julie?
Well,
what are you looking at me for?
Because you said it's one of those moments you never forget, but I feel like I have forgotten the very first time. I feel like I've known Jim for longer than I have actually known him, because he was friends with my mom for a long time, and they were on boards and doing things. She knew him quite well when Village was founded, and I remember her sending me a video of Jim moving a giant stack of beer, and I don't even know how many pallets high, coming out of the you've probably seen the video right on the loader. Yep. And it's starting to sway, and then it just toppled over, and he took it in stride, right? Yeah. Like, this is life. It's how things go. And so at some point I met him, and he's just one of the best energies of my life,
Yeah. And that's a good word, is the energy, because one of the things when you say that, Terry, there's just certain people, I think back my whole life of friends that I met in university, friends that I grew up with, that I've worked with, and just every now and again someone's energy just kind of like you remember it forever, right? I'm just curious with you. So you meet Avnish, you meet Jim, but what was it that like was that energy there for you with him as well, where you just like what made you go from meeting him to having that, you know, introduction, having that first meeting to having that lifelong friendship?
Well, I think it's like his energy is contagious, right? Like it's just sort of like you feel naturally optimistic when you're in Jim's presence, and it was just like, this is somebody who is doing things, can do things, right? Is willing to, at the time, I feel like willing to like explore anything, right?
Yeah.
And on Monday, it sort of came up that Jim would give you an unsolicited opinion, you know, like, and it sort of came up a couple of times, and it was just sort of that
receive well.
Receive well. That's right. Yeah. But I think it was just that you sort of feel, I felt sort of very comfortable.
Yeah.
And you just sort of feel at peace when you're interacting with somebody like that. And the fact that he remembered me, or like he knew who I was.
Yeah.
He's an important guy sort of at the time, or what, you know, however that was shaped up. But it was just him. He made the effort. He was always there and willing to be able to say, yeah, sure, let's meet for a coffee. Let's figure this out. Any moment I reached out, he would always reciprocate. And like that type of energy back and forth would absolutely, like, or is absolutely just sort of, it's where you want to be, right? It's where you want to sort of be surrounded by.
In that way, for me, it was, you know, I remember meeting him about the same time frame as you, Terry, kind of right when Village first opened. And actually, Pete sent me Jim's first Instagram post, and I was in it, and I didn't recognize myself. It took me a few, I'm like, what? I don't know why he sent that to me. But one of the things that Jim would do is after festivals, he would send me an email and just, you know, kind of give me some feedback on what he really liked about it, you know, what he thought that needed work. And what was funny about that is, because I remember Jim saying that once, where he doesn't give unsolicited advice. I'm like, with all due respect, Jim, yes, you do. But, you know, for him to take the time, and especially because he had done so many events before, so he understood on a deeper level, you know, what we were doing with the festivals. And so to get his input, and not just the, hey, good job, you know, it was like, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? To me, that was, you know, really important. And that's what sparked it for me, was that became kind of how he became my mentor, because anytime I had a project, then I would go to him and say, what do you think about this? Knowing that I'd get, you know, his honest opinion, right? So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm curious if you guys could think about a unique skill that he had. And I'll start just to give you some time to put some thought into it. One of the things that I always enjoyed about Jim, whether it's going for a walk or, you know, talking to him on the phone, is he was always present. You know, he was never looking at his watch going, you know, okay, wrap this up, I gotta go. You always felt like you had all of him for the time that you were with him. Mm-hmm. So for me, that's something that really stood out, and something that I tried to kind of emulate. I wonder if you guys have thoughts about like certain skills that he had that maybe you tried to emulate.
Ladies first, because we're not going to do this around the table crap.
Yeah.
I knew he was going to start controlling the room eventually.
Right, yeah. Start delegating.
Yeah.
Look, let's arm wrestle.
Yeah. That was my first reaction too, is that he was very present. He focused right on you. And I, you know, at first I felt it was a little bit unnerving when all his attention is on me, all his energy is on me. Say something smart. And, but since I sort of noticed that quality about him, I really tried to emulate it and be sort of in the moment and give all my attention to the person that I'm with. But also his ability to just, you know, have unpopular opinions or like give advice, solicited or not.
Yeah.
I remember running into him once. I mean, I had known him for a long time, but, you know, I was at this point in my career where people kept saying, you know, you need an assistant and you need this and you need that. And I was like, but there's so much stuff that it would take more for me to delegate, right? Yeah. So I run into him at Gravity at the coffee shop, and I sort of blurt this up. He's like, no, you don't. No, you don't. It's way more work to, you know. I was like, thank you. You're the first person to say, you know, delegate what you can, but to get somebody to answer your emails, right. You know, it's how do you do that? But and his humor, like his ability to have fun, right? Going
that unsuspected
camping,
fun,
spontaneous fun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was so natural and authentic. You know, I agree with both of you. Like, I think from my standpoint, his ability like my cousin came out in August, and in typical Andryo fashion, we sit around the table for about 4 hours, and then we move to another table, meet for another 4 hours. And I says, we got to go for a walk. So I called Jim. I says, I'm bringing 2 cousins. And at the end of that walk that we did, Bill said to me, he says, holy shit, this guy's like Mr. Popularity. And all he wanted to do was listen about me and learn about me. Like he didn't want to talk about himself. All he wanted to do was listen to my story.
Yeah.
And that was pretty unique. And the other one was the unsolicited advice. He told you what you needed to hear rather than what you wanted to hear.
Yeah,
And that's how I always framed it.
Yeah.
Like recently, about a month and a half ago, I wrote a strategy and he ripped it apart. But that's what I wanted him to do.
Yeah.
I wanted him to find holes in it and break it apart. I didn't want him to tell me it was great and everything like that. That's what my mom and dad are there for.
Totally. That's so funny.
Yeah.
You stole my thought there, Terry, because
Okay, so I'm controlling the room.
you're
Stealing thoughts.
Okay, I'm out of here.
Cakes. It's okay.
No. But so I'm working on a project called Explore 84, and so Terry's been nice enough to kind of, like to your point, give me honest feedback. Okay, like what's this about? I'm really getting to the why of it, and so Terry challenged me to really put some thought into that. And so, stayed up all night writing this down, putting my why down. And some of it included, stories of Jim. So I wanted to make sure that when I emailed it to Terry, that I had, I CC'd Jim on it, but he was in hospice at the time. I wasn't expecting for him to look at it, but I thought I don't want to talk about him without including him. Sure. And literally, I think I emailed it at 6:30 in the morning. At 7 o'clock, I get an email back from Jim. He's like, well, it needs work. And then he just critiques the whole thing. And I was just like, oh, I'm like, I love you.
It's like he was watching my Instagram stories in hospice and, commenting. And I'm like, and such a great nurturer of relationships, right? And when you think about what's important in life, it's the people, but we often don't, in our actual day-to-day lives, prioritize people and the relationships. We think of all these things that we should be doing and working harder and accomplishments or whatever, but his attention to the nurturing of relationships, which is the focus of so many memories of him, is just something that
and just the authenticity behind that too, right? It wasn't a facade. It wasn't a marketing gimmick. It was real. What about you? Any funny stories?
Just on this, I think some of the brilliance behind it is like Hump Day was, I think, a great example of where Jim was realizing that everybody was getting pulled out of the brewery to have a bunch of meetings. He's like, you know what? Let's figure out a day where everybody can come to me. Right? That was sort of I think that the self-centeredness behind it, but it's not like it's about efficiency and accuracy and all the other things that I can do. Yeah. But I'm going to bring everybody together, and we have these events. But every one of those, Wednesdays, Jim had. He had his to-do list, and as much as he was for sure with you, but he wasn't going to allow for the things that he needed to get done to not get done either, right? And so he orchestrated a lot of that stuff. Hey, Avnish, talk to Terry for a second, and now we're busy, and he can go off and do what he needs to. It was so masterful in terms of some of those things. And I think the Eddies was a great example of that. Again, how do I bring people around to a place where we're going to be the center of it, but everybody's going to sort of enjoy it and not even know that they're a part of something that's not about them, because you feel that it's all about you. And it's just that type of stuff is just it's just genius. It's just the way he does it.
And he did it in a seamless manner.
Totally.
It didn't look orchestrated. It didn't look
But even on that point, I mean, I don't know if you guys were aware of it, but towards the end, the last 2 or 3 years, he's getting Jackson to do the speeches, and he was getting Jeremy to do the speeches. He no longer did the speeches. So he was passing that torch 2 years or 3 years ago. Yeah. Which was, again, not a lot of people saw that. But you realize that Jim's standing in the back of the room and Jeremy's talking and he's going, and he's kind of mouthing his speech.
Roxanne.
Which is great because, he was ready to pass that torch on, and Jackson was doing a great job, and so was Jeremy, So those things were going on in the background that no one really realized. So he could have those conversations instead of pushing you to meet somebody else. Totally. Go ahead and mentor those kids so they have a good basis to move forward with.
Well, and as far as leadership goes, that's huge, right? Because you see a lot of companies that when their leader has to leave, the companies fail. And some people would point to that, to, what a great leader he was. They can't sustain themselves without him. Whereas others would look at it the opposite, which is a great leader builds it up so that it does succeed once they leave.
Yeah.
And I think he's an example of that.
Exactly.
Yeah. One of the things that I was thinking about, so the ability, so for how he supported people. So for me, we did a video, and when Village first started, so we did a video, which is, Avnish, where I would have met you for the first time, just kind of sharing the Village story. Never having produced a video before, I know exactly who to talk to, right? I'm like, hey, Jim, never done a video, but we're going to do one. Can we do it on Village? He's like, yeah, sure, let's do it. My first podcast was with Jim. And the funny thing with that was the day before, I think, he calls in, the president of Beer Canada is in town, and they're going to have breakfast together. I'm like, oh, no, I totally understand. We can reschedule. He's like, no, I'm bringing him with me. So the first podcast is me and Jim and the president of Beer Canada. I'm like, yeah, no pressure whatsoever. Totally. Yeah. And then even just the idea of, doing the podcast takeover, which is something that I really wanted to get a sense of, how do other people approach asking questions and stuff. And I thought it'd be really neat to just sit there almost as a fly on the wall and watch, Jim do it. And again, just like quickly agreeable. And then that's how we kind of connected, was through that. So just his authentic support, I think, was so good. And you guys mentioned something about, he was, some people give him, I'm going to try to not sound like an asshole. People say that he was really nice, and he was nice, but he wasn't nice like you said, like parents are nice, like, oh, good job.
Yeah.
He was honest.
Absolutely.
And he was able to be honest in a nice way.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, he was kind.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind.
He was kind. I feel like nice is a little bit more superficial. He was nice, but he was also kind.
Yes.
And genuine, and I love the way he connected people. You need to meet this person, and there was no ego, right? There was no competitiveness. There was like building the community rather than seeing other people as potential competition. And being genuinely excited about introducing friends. When you think of two people and you want them to meet and they get along great and you're so excited, that's sort of Jim, right?
But you know what, even walking with him personally, like one-on-one, we never talked about people in a bad way.
No,
so
drama.
It was really ground into them that, there wasn't a negative thing that would come out of his mouth. It was always, how do we help that person? Never a downplay on it.
Yeah.
So I never heard the negative stories or
changes the subject. All of a sudden Jim goes quiet, and then we change the subject. I was like, oh, okay.
Enough said.
Yeah, totally. Let's not go there.
Yeah.
So when you think, you went for many walks with him in the last few years. When you think about, him not being with us anymore, what are the things that you're going to miss the most?
For me, on our walks, like there is times that we have 20 to 25 people, which is hard to manage. But, Jim would stop every 500 meters and go, okay, Mark, you walk with Avnish. Now you're going to walk with Julie. Like he would shift people around, and he'd purposely have people there that didn't know each other.
Yeah.
And that get them out of their comfort zone to meet the community. So I think that for me was probably the biggest miss. Just the time him and I would spend together. Yeah. Certainly going to miss that the most. But, his ability to change things up quickly and naturally is hard to replace. Yeah. And you know what? I don't think anybody's ever going to replace him there.
No.
And nor should someone try to.
No. Yeah. I think what he's done is he's inspired us to do, take the skills that we have and kind of use them and help in the ways that we're able to. Yeah, to your point, trying to be Jim is impossible. Yeah. So what about for you, Avnish? What are you gonna miss about Jim when you think about times you've been with him?
I think there's probably for me, I think it's just like the sense of like confidence and ease, right? Like that it's going to be a positive interaction, right? And you know that it isn't positive as in like the outcome may not necessarily be positive, right? We talk about some pretty heavy things, but just the idea that you can be your whole self when you're with Jim, and even if there is 25 other people, like just that everybody becomes sort of the truest version of themselves in that way, and I think that's probably it, is like not seeing I have that with a few people. I have that with my partner, and I'm just like really appreciative of that. But that's sort of a limited group of people where you can actually sort of feel that real, like I am 100% myself here because you create that safety for me to do that.
Right.
And that's what Jim, I think, brought to, for sure, into our relationship. It's just like, you be you and I'll be me. And then we'll see where it sort of collides and clashes, right?
One of the things I feel like you guys had a unique relationship. Like I read Jim's blog. Sometimes I'd have to stop for periods of time because I'd just be like, oh my God, I can't process that. But I feel like you guys connected very spiritually. Is that correct?
Yeah. And sort of unexpectedly, this wasn't sort of, I think it was part of a macro plan and like a life plan as to why Jim and I are sort of attracted to each other in this life and at this time. But yeah, there was I think a deep evaluation for both of us in terms of our own spirituality. What does it mean? How is it applied? Things that work, things that don't work, right? Like I think there's a number of pieces here where you start to find meaning in a number of things as to why it's happening or why isn't this happening or, whatever that is. And then trusting the process, right? And that was a big part of a lot of our conversations was just like talking about trust and understanding that the difficulties of sort of being in it, but wanting to commit to whatever it is. Yeah. And I feel like Jim, he was just so good at that. He was so good at and not necessarily showing how the current state was impacting him, right? But like really saying, okay, well, this is part of this journey and we'll see what happens after this moment. And it was just that moment to moment piece that really, I think in terms of a presence, you could see, and that's a spiritual journey, absolutely, right? And there's some other things that we explored and some other really sort of random, weird, some of the out there stuff, right? Which is
you did mushrooms, just say no.
I noticed he was walking a lot with Rob Swinsky,
Mushroom beer.
Write that down.
It's fun, but then the other side of it is like even over the last little while, where as people are reading Jim's blog, there's random people reaching out to be like, hey, so like I'm interested in spirituality, and I'm like, cool, like fuck off, right? Like, good luck with that.
Things not to ask Gav about anymore.
But it's just kind of like I'm in my own space. But I remember one time I met this. Jim was like, hey, somebody reached out to me. I think you should meet them. And I met her at the library, and she was like, oh, you're much younger than I thought you would be. And I was like, okay. And she's like, I thought maybe, and I'm like, what, that I would have a beard? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, all right, this is like, should I be sitting on a mountain, like in an orange robe? Like,
I'm also not hovering. Is that going to bother you?
Yeah, I can an episode of Seinfeld.
It's kind of it, right? Like,
Donna Chang.
That's another one. The Pez.
Totally.
Yeah,
you guys stop laughing because I'm like,
And then you guys really connected. Obviously, you towards the end of his life, you guys were both, battling your own health concerns. Is that something that you guys connected with? I feel like you guys kind of propped each other up with that.
Yeah, when I got diagnosed and decided to go on long-term disabilities, Jim and Tracy, like both of them were there for us. It wasn't just Jim, it was Tracy as well. Mm-hmm. And I mean, Maria and Tracy are close because of this as well. Mm-hmm. So the caregiver role that Maria plays was kind of the same thing that Tracy did, but what to do in disabilities and what to look for. Like we wouldn't have never got to where we are comfortably without Jim and Tracy helping us.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful every single day for them because, I mean, Jim went through that and fought a whole bunch of things, with his insurance providers, and it made it so easy for us. Like, and all he kept saying, like, what did he say to Tracy? Something about like, I can't afford to fuck up my disabilities. Oh, yeah. Or Tracy's going to kill me. Well, do you think my wife's not going to kill me if I fuck up my disabilities? Yeah. So the same thing, like we played a parallel life in that sense that, both of us were third kid out of four. Both of us were, happy-go-lucky individuals. Both of us are fighting the same type of, yet a different disease, but went down the kind of the same path. So without him being the first one, we wouldn't have been so smooth as what we did.
Yeah.
And, I'm thankful for Tracy as well. Like yesterday Maria said that she phoned us to see how we were doing.
Yeah.
You know,
She's been so amazing in the way she has connected with everybody who's grieving and looking to her to help them through this.
Yeah.
And I've seen it so many times. She makes a point of telling everybody a specific memory that, you know, Jim thought so fondly of you because of this and, you know, this situation. And it just through her own grief has made a point of really helping everyone through theirs.
Yeah.
It's been amazing.
One of the things that I learned, you know, through Tracy and through Jim is, you know, you really have to be your own quarterback in these journeys. You know, I have a friend whose dad has just found out he had cancer. So he has stage 4 cancer. And there's this real surprise when, you know, you get kind of given that news and there's no one there that's going to kind of walk you through the journey, you know? And that's what I learned through Jim and through you, Terry, is that, you know, it is you. And if you're lucky, you have a partner. So, you know, Jim had Tracy to kind of help that journey, because it's not something that the healthcare system is really set up to kind of like, okay, this will be your point and they're going to take you from here to here, right? So the idea that Tracy committed her life to that is amazing. Yeah. So what am I missing? Like, is there something about Jim that you want to share? A funny story, time when he was slipped up and was just a big asshole. Let's talk some dirt.
Had a couple beers. Let's open up.
And another thing.
Another thing.
No, the only thing that I shared the other night that not many people knew is, like, the last week before he passed away, we were in hospice with him, and he said to me before I came in, because I always checked in with Tracy beforehand. So every Wednesday we'd go up and I'd send a text to Tracy and to Jim saying, okay, are we good to go? Mm-hmm. And he said, like, this is the last week. He says, this is going to be the last week. Mm-hmm. And I went, okay, what does that mean? And I told him basically FO, because you've been telling this for 7 years, right?
Yeah.
And he says, keep it to an hour. So I told the boys when we walked in, we got an hour. We stayed to the clock and we said, okay. And he says, and he stopped us. So I says, I want to make sure that we keep to the hour. He talked about himself for 45 minutes, which Jim has never done. Mm-hmm. He held the floor for 45 minutes and he's kind of coming in and going out. And then we said, okay, Tracy's here. We got to go. No. You guys tell me about your week, because you guys don't take from me. You give to me.
Yeah.
And those are things that'll never go away from me. You know, it's just the fact that he took 45 minutes to talk about himself, which to me is unprecedented.
For sure.
Yeah.
You know, but he just talked about he's at peace and everything like that. And I just kind of went, okay, now we got to go. Nope, you guys sit.
Yeah.
Tell me about your week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, so to me, that's something worth sharing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I was out in Jasper in November at an event at the Jasper Park Lodge.
Yeah.
And
Christmas in Jasper.
Christmas in November, in Jasper. And it's really busy schedule, so like lots of stuff going on. And I happened to go back to my room in the middle of the day and I was sitting on the couch, beautifully snowy outside. And for some reason I usually, you know, I have my phone or my laptop I just wasn't doing anything at all. And my phone was off, the notifications were off, but I picked it up just as he was FaceTiming me.
Oh.
And he said, I just wanted to call and tell you that I love you. Oh, and just I happened to be just sitting there, just not even thinking about anything, you know? So I had this amazing conversation from hospice, of course. And, you know, just, I don't know, like, just, he leads with example. You know, I could call up anybody and say, oh, hey, I just wanted to tell you that I love you.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, even at his memorial, the fact that there were postcards in the program, and Tracy said, Dave, can we talk about Dave? You know, send a postcard to somebody who you're thinking about and just tell them, because those things make such a difference.
It does.
Yeah.
Such a difference, right? And just, you know, his ability to see the good in people, to see everybody's strength. Everyone has some strength, and include everybody. You know, there was never this sort of sense of like, clickiness or
No.
he's sort of in a little swarm. But anyway, I just was one of the most amazing.
And I did happen to be in Jasper at the time, and I saw you, I think, in the hall just after that.
Oh yeah,
and
that's right.
But I could just tell, like, you had a moment that was special to see. What about you, Avnish? Anything come to mind?
I think there's a couple of times. I think sometimes I really frustrated Jim. I feel
sometimes.
You think you're alone there?
You should have been on the walks with me and Jim.
That's not what I've heard. But go ahead.
I used to talk about you a lot.
You annoyed him.
And there was little things like I remember telling him I'm like, hey, look, talk to your meds. And he's like, shut up. And I'm like, no, really. And then and the best part about Jim was that as much as he might dismiss something and be really frustrated by it, 3 days later, it's like, okay, I'm talking to my meds, right? I'd get a little text message being fine, reconciled.
Yeah.
But I think it happened. It happened once. I remember, when his when he tore his arm, and that was a piece. And we were on a walk, and I said, hey, you know what, Jim? In terms of what this means, we're talking about thin-skinned. And from a an energetic place, this is you've got a thin skin, and he took it so personally, and he just started pushing up against me, and was just like, I don't have a thin skin, just went off. And then I'm like, did you just hear everything you said? Because you've got a really thin skin. We just sat down on the bed for a little while, and he's like, I understand, fine. This is so frustrated. But that was, I think, the reflection never ended. Mm-hmm. Right, that was the part where Jim is you have these interactions, and then and whether it's a better idea or a way to have you thought about this or what, it was constantly there, and that was I think a big part of our connection was me just our conversations around self-care and just the internal piece where he wouldn't talk about himself, but it was a lot of. Where's your energy going, and who is consuming it, and how is it being consumed, and there was a lot of those types of pieces where Jim would immediately see that he's not doing anything wrong, and then upon reflection be like, hey, you know what, I need to spend more time with Tracy, I need to spend more time with the kids, these kind of pieces that came up afterwards where you didn't have to press it with him. You just sort of suggest something, and he would actually reflect on it and give it some real thought, rather than it just being look, I'm on my own journey, which he was.
Yeah.
Right. I can't imagine how isolating that journey could have been at times. But it was never. He would never show that. He would never sort of demonstrate that. And I think that was some of the parts where I'm sure I got under his skin, and I don't want this anymore.
He was so thin.
He was something, exactly.
But that's obviously what he wanted. He needed that honesty, right? He needed that kind of he wasn't asking for you to say, oh no, you're doing everything great. He needed to be challenged, right? So that's what he needed from you.
I think so. And from because he loved to solve problems.
Yeah.
Right. And the moment he was faced with a challenge, he's like, oh, I can figure this thing out, right?
Yeah.
And so if he didn't have a challenge, then it was just, oh, this is too easy.
Yeah.
And so at times you had to, it doesn't feel nice that poor guy's got that huge gash on his arm. I'm like, this is about you being thin-skinned,
which is literal and a metaphor.
That's
so
it.
Figure it out.
Yeah. Get out of here.
One of the things for me in September, him and I were trying to connect for a walk, and he had to cancel a couple of times. And it's of course, just when it works, just call me. So he called me on a Monday morning and said, hey, can you walk this morning? So 9:00 on a Monday, I'm like, yeah, of course. So I go down there and we walk for an hour, and we're talking about different things, and we do the loop kind of thing. And then he's like, what are you doing now? And to be honest, I had a meeting with my team and stuff like that, but I'm like, nothing, I'm good. He's like, want to do another loop? I'm like, 100%. So we got to do another loop, and then the next time I talked to him, he was going into hospice. So it was just like, what a special opportunity to just kind of have those 2 hours together.
He'd do the same to me, except he'd go, I got to go pick up my meds. You want to go walk and pick up my meds?
Yeah.
Don't you love that?
Yeah. Or I got to change tires on my car. You want to go to the, and it's just the time together that we
Totally.
had, or move some furniture. We have some antique furniture 2 blocks down. Can you bring your truck and we'll load it?
Yeah.
Of course.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Well, and the effort that, sorry.
No, go.
Just the effort that he put into having fun as well. I was thinking about the camping trip last summer. There's an annual camping trip out to Kananaskis that I've been lucky to be part of for the last 2 years. And there's always a theme. So last year was Canada. So we did the Great White North, right? And did it with Tracy and Jim, and went to great lengths to come up with the Elsinore beer in bottles, right, from Strange Brew with Bob and Doug McKenzie. So
by the way, that was bad beer.
It was terrible. It was terrible. It was terrible beer, but it doesn't matter because like the labels, he was so excited about going and getting like the bottles and the caps and then the labels and printed, and then he was feeling rough, but I was trying to like prompt him with lines from Strange Brew, right? And then like the Bob and Doug stuff, like and like good day, right? And he's like, and he kept saying like the wrong thing. I can't remember what it was, like happy day or something. No, it's good day,
Come on, man. You go,
come on, and he'd be like line, and with his toque and his big, anyway,
that's
just
awesome.
like.
So with that camping story, a few years ago, this would have been 4 or 5 years ago, I have a little trailer. So he wanted to use the trailer instead of, in the teepees or the hunters cabins that they have. Yeah. So me and him brought my trailer out for him to use. And so everyone else is kind of setting up, right? And one of the guys wasn't given the spot that he normally gets. And he's like, hey, Jim. And Jim organizes this camping trip, right?
He does,
So he's like, hey, man, no one really want to complain, but normally I'm here and this year I'm here. And Jim's just like, well, to be fair, when I organized this, I thought I'd be dead by now. So I didn't really care who was going to be where. And I was just like, trump that.
End of discussion.
Okay.
This is good.
But like that was like 4 or 5 years ago, like I said, you know what I mean? Like that's his resilience. So this morning as I was getting ready for the day, I was listening to a podcast. So a couple years ago, I think I had mentioned, I asked Jim to kind of do a takeover of my podcast. I was curious who he would talk to, what their conversations would be. And I just literally just sat and listened. And so you, Julie, were one of the people that he talked to. And we had to do this. This was over COVID. So we were doing this over Zoom. But I thought this was a really interesting quote. He said, you inspire me. He said this to you. He said, you inspire me in so many different ways. I find people who inspire me don't just do shit, but they're resilient too. And, I think like when I think about like why were you guys such big parts of his lives? I think, you guys do shit, but you're resilient too. You don't just do shit and go away. You do shit. If you fail, you come back, and that's that's the people he wanted to be around is people who just, did shit and kept doing shit. And I think that's when I think about why he was friends with you guys, I think that's exactly it. So thanks for sharing your stories with me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
for sure.
thank you.
All right. Cheers.
Cheers
Guys.
to Jimmy.
Cheers.
Jimmy. And Tracy.
And Tracy.